folks, here I am back again with another video, back to back. Just finished the one on the paper, and now another presentation of mine that I slapped together. See what you think of it. And this one is titled "Many Thanks to the Internet." And the point that I'm trying to convey here is, or the crux of the point is, if it wasn't for the internet, I would remain an ignorant person. I would have only known, what certain institutions that surround me would have tried to indoctrinate me with, and seeking out and finding alternative viewpoints would have been very difficult, if not impossible. So, in the World Wide Web, even though we say it's overtaken our life, and we always like to point out the negativities, but the World Wide Web, along with all the troubles that it's brought us, it has also introduced to us many, many opportunities that were simply not conceivable prior to its creation. Anyways, let's proceed. First, I want to share with you a quote. I don't really know who first made the statement, but a fellow libertarian podcaster, Bennett Hunter, I seen him post this on Facebook, and that's where I seen it for the first time. And I think it brilliantly captures the actual fact of the matter regarding being a netizen in the 21st century, and basically saying that if you're still a dogmatic person, the responsibility is solely your own, And even though you have all the tools and the avenues to which you could take to expose yourself to new ideas and challenge yourself, and to strengthen your position, and to extend your worldview. Instead, you rejected advancing in that way. Instead, decided to stick with what you had initially, and didn't go on to challenge your beliefs, and ended up resembling in your behavior the dogmatic religionists. Alright, let me just check this recording. Alright, awesome. So, my personal case, I want to give 3 examples based on where I live, and where I've been, and what kind of family I grew up in, and stuff like that. The 3 sources of information or culture that would have been imposed on me, and how they are vulnerable to errors will be self-evident when considered objectively. So let's proceed. First of all, obviously, since I was born into a Muslim family, and if I grew up in a Muslim community, without the access to the internet, you could rarely, if ever, find information contrary to the dogma that they've stuck you with. It will be nearly impossible, especially if you're in a Muslim country. There, even perhaps the internet is itself monitored, and to ensure that certain kind of content doesn't make its way out. If I'm not mistaken, Turkey, they had banned YouTube for several years. I don't know if that's still the case, but it's understandable that the authorities could be enraged by some of the sentiment, alternative sentiment that could be put out on YouTube. But yeah, if it wasn't for the internet, then I would have remained a Muslim. I would have found no means to study about the about the history of the region that I come from, and that there was, in fact, a history prior to Islam, and that history was rich, it was diverse, it was and it had much wisdom and knowledge to share. But of course, with the nature of any history, it's written by its victors. So if it's not for the scarce amount of information, that is sort of dispersed within many nations and all made its way into the World Wide Web. I mean, if you're learning history through what the school's teaching you, that's sort of like that's the one basically approved by the state, and you don't really get on. You are not really made cognizant of the different interpretations of history, or the aspects of history that could have been um, that could have been lacking in attention in terms of the curriculum, or been left out altogether. So next is the university. I just completed my final semester of undergrad in political science, and let me tell you, academic bias is in fact a thing. Of course, they like to sort of deny this or shrug this off in academic circles, but it is in fact a thing. There's certain viewpoint that university campuses try to encourage, and it's just this like thought bubble, and if you are, let's say, for example, now a fan of our leader at the time, of our leader, Prime Minister, and his viewpoints, that basically your ideas, your views of the world really conforms to the conventional standard. And that's the one that's basically being encouraged on campuses, and some. So what I tried to do when I was in university was to seek out the so-called centrist professors. Centrist, is almost an inane term. What I really mean to say by that is, since they are really all leftists, the more moderate leftists that are at least willing to entertain ideas that may be contrary to whatever is conventional. So that's how I try to get through it, and it was not easy. It was not easy, but hopefully the next school I will be applying to, I will find people who think in different and radical ways. All right, let us proceed. Next is the television, right? And now, of course, there are these four news channels. These are basically the top ones in Canada. And there's the other stuff, which I have not included. But the point is, it's a television, and it's certainly open to question. Now, even though in this regards, in literature at least, in terms of how the media can be utilized by the state, an example often given is the Pravda newspaper of the Soviet Union. But I like to make the case that, Pravda is just the paragon or the perfect example, or the most conspicuous example of such state utilization of the media. But the thing is, the the news media of the current day, they are perhaps just as biased and just as agenda driven. It's just that they are more subtle in their ways, you know. Or perhaps for some reason we are reluctant or hesitant to equate them to Pravda. And probably, back in the 70s, 60s, and so forth in the Soviet Union, if you were to ask an average Joe in the Soviet Union, if you asked them whether Pravda was an objectively reported the news, they would say yes, perhaps just as confidently as a Canadian citizen would be of the CBC. But of course, that's a result of not being able to see beyond the horizon of what is being, of what you're being exposed to. All right, let us proceed. Now, from here, I want to get on to the various avenues or channels through the World Wide Web, which has really helped me acquire information and challenge my views and advance my perspective on the world. And one thing I got to really attribute to is Wikipedia. Now, of course, Wikipedia is, a lot of people say, oh, anybody could go in and write whatever the hell they want and leave it there. Another person will read it and be misled and thinking it would be true. Well, here, try this. Try, going to the page of Vladimir Putin or anything, United States, any article on Wikipedia. Try to edit something. Try to see how long it would take before that gets changed. I don't think it would take that long. And the thing is, Wikipedia, even though it may obviously not be an adequate source of information when you're writing, say, an academic paper, but for exploring general information, I think it's a great resource. And encyclopedias in general, I've always enjoyed looking through encyclopedias. It's just, from A to Z, anything, if you ever wondered about it, you could just read up on it. It's just amazing. And Wikipedia, if sometimes you want to verify the information that is conveying to you, at the bottom it even has the footnotes. It even has the references, and you could go on to find out more about it. But Wikipedia also offers, like, let's say you're reading about the miracle of Jesus Christ and the virgin birth and stuff like that. Wikipedia will give you maybe a dozen other examples of the same phenomenon happening in other religions. And then you start to question yourself, because you notice a pattern, because this encyclopedia had just pointed it out to you. And the story in the Bible seems less unique than you initially thought it was. And that's what's really wonderful about Wikipedia. All right, let us proceed. Next is podcasts. Now, this is Theo Vaughn's podcast, and which I listen to sometimes. But the mural on the wall, Podcastville, which he has several of the podcasters on there. But the point I'm basically trying to make with this is podcasts have been, for me, a great source of information and entertainment. you know, some are really educational, some are really instructional, some are really motivational, and perhaps it's really become greater than 50% of my entertainment at this point. And I've learned a lot from these guys. I look up to these guys, and it would just be an honor to be able to meet them one day. I don't know if that's ever going to be a possibility, but it all initially started out for me with Joe Rogan, and that man, he's influenced me significantly in my life. You know, especially how critical he is of his own beliefs, of himself, how modest he is, how he's willing to challenge the guests and their beliefs, and also to psychedelics, which have really become a significant part of my life. And even though people say cannabis is supposedly a gateway drug, but for me, Joe Rogan himself was the gateway drug. So if it wasn't for me being inspired by that man, then drugs wouldn't have interested me. And yeah, so, and through drugs, I was able to find my how to put this, sort of a newfound belief in higher power. One that is irreligious yet that embraces and acknowledges there being something beyond what we're able to perceive in our physical realm, in the physical realm. But also politically, it was Joe Rogan who facilitated the conversation that got me looking into libertarianism, and specifically Austrian School of Economics. Now, in regards to this, a lot of people ascribe their introduction being through the Ron Paul's participation in the Republican primary debates back in 2008 and 2012. And I had seen clips of those even before I had watched this particular episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. But when I did watch this episode, this is what really got me interested and curious about this. Peter Schiff really made a great case, and I was just consuming a whole lot of his content put up on YouTube, and Mr. Schiff really delivers a smack of common sense, and he was also really inspirational for me. I would see Schiff go on stage to give a speech, and he would say, "I only found out about my topic for this speech about a minute ago," but he goes up there and gives a fantastic speech. It's just amazing how he's able to destroy economic fallacies. That's how much he's got those principles and knowledge of economics really established within him. And I'm hoping to learn about economics, politics, and other subjects, and hopefully try to convey them as confidently as this man. I'm only a young man right now, but hopefully through persistence, I will eventually get there. But yeah, in fact, it was Mr. Schiff who got me curious about the Austrian approach, the libertarian approach. Yeah. So let us proceed now. And I did briefly mention psychedelics. And here's another podcast, a really good one. And Mike Tyson, man, he is such an inspirational figure. Since I was born in the 90s, mid 90s, and I don't I'm not really. For me, Mike Tyson as a person is not a boxer first. Rather, I know him mostly through this podcast. And the person that he's, or the impression of the person that I got from him, is of a wise sage. And that's what exactly his co host, Eben Britton, says. Hanging out with Mike is like hanging out with a wise sage. And I gotta say, in a lot of these episodes, especially when Mike is, is lit up to Mary Jane, he spits a lot of wisdom. It's just inspirational. It's profound, and and yeah, I really enjoy watching this podcast. And in this particular episode, Mike, in the middle of the episode, actually goes back and tries what's known as the God molecule, the most potent psychedelic known to man, 5-MeO-DMT, which is derived from the Sonoran Desert Toad. And ever since, Mike has been a psychonaut. He's become a changed person. If I'm not mistaken, prior to that event, he still had his challenges with cocaine, and afterwards he completely dropped that habit and became a changed man, an inspiring man, a wise man, and a psychonaut, somebody who really appreciates and expounds on the benefits of entheogens. And there's somebody has suggested this in the comments below one of the uploads on the podcast, and I think it should really become a slogan to this podcast. I don't know if they've officially adopted it yet, but if there was a T-shirt that had this on it and maybe a picture of a toad, I definitely want one, or a couple. All right, let us proceed. Okay, so next thing I wanted to mention was we're very lucky to be able to know the English language, because we got to realize that English language, even though perhaps by the number of speakers is still trumped by Hindi and Mandarin, a few other languages, but in terms of the variety of information, whether you consider entertainment, education, movies, books, the variety in English is way beyond any other language. There's the state view and the alternative views, and alternative to those views is just so wide, so wide. And us being able to understand and speak the English language, we're really fortunate that we're able to do so, because we now have access to that literature, to that information. And here I wanted to give you a impression of this. This is Wikipedia enlisting the different versions of Wikipedia, and how the different languages align in terms of how many articles they do contain. And English is at the top, no surprise, with 6.2 million articles. And some of the other languages, I was surprised. Apparently, this language called Cebuano, and the last one on this list, Waray. Apparently, they both come from Philippines. And I mean, they Cebuano is top 2. I don't know how they made it there. I don't know if this is a mistake or of some sort, but I'm surprised at that. And then it's followed by Swedish, German, French, Dutch. But basically, the point here that I'm trying to make is, other than having access to the World Wide Web, it's really also having access to the English language, or being able to utilize the English language that's important, that will give you greater access to that information available in the world. Because if you don't, if you spoke a language, let's say, that's spoken by less than 100,000 people, you're really at a disadvantage, no matter if you have internet access or not. Consider this. This is a language spoken in the Canadian North, specifically, or certainly in the territory called Nunavut. As you can see, this is the display board at the airport in the capital city of Nunavut, called Iqaluit, and this is the Inuktitut language spoken by the Inuit people. And I checked out the stats. This language is spoken by approximately 40,000 people. Now, I'm sure Inuktitut has advantages in some ways that's not extant in other languages. If I'm not mistaken, I heard somewhere, I've never verified this, but they got several words for the word snow in Inuktitut, because they're seeing snow 11, 12 months of the year, and so they're aware of the different sorts of snow. Even though we have one word for such a thing, but for them, they're aware and able to distinguish between the different varieties of snow based on the season or month of the year. But the thing is, since it's only spoken by 40,000 people around the world, it's in terms of how much information is being conveyed through this medium, namely the language, it's quite limited. So if all you knew was Inuktitut, and let's say you had internet access, your access to information, though, is still, strictly curtailed. And yeah, that's what sucks about it. But I'm sure that Inuktitut and many other languages in the world, they have unique ways to express things that are not extant in other languages, unique ways or unique idioms, or however you want to put it, and it would be really difficult to translate them into another language. But what I also wanted to point out about the English languages is that it seems in sort of the competition or in the marketplace of languages, English is in the lead. Back in the day, apparently they had a project to create a language for the world that everybody could use to communicate. It was called Esperanto, I think. But really, that's not how that works. If some academics are going to come together and create a language out of scratch and say, all right, here you are, everybody, teach the children, that just seems like an artificial way to come up with a language. Language really takes generations and generations to form and to amass various contributions to really expand its vocabulary and expand its capacity as being a tool for expression. So I think Esperanto, though interesting to consider, it is really a blunder, because really, who speaks Esperanto? Anyway, so that was my thoughts on the World Wide Web And I hope you guys were able to get where I was coming from, how it's benefited me, and perhaps some of them or some of these things you can also relate to, or you could find other ways in which language has greatly, or how access to the World Wide Web has greatly benefited you as being a critical thinker, or in the various religious, political, and social views that you hold that you simply wouldn't have encountered otherwise. Let's say if you had lived 50, 100 or so years ago. Alright, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Like, share, subscribe.